So before we begin, I just want to make very clear that this video does not contain any spoilers for Chapter 1000. Nothing about Chapter 1000 itself will be talked about in this video. That's because, well, Chapter 1000 hasn't released yet, at least from my perspective. I am currently recording this on Monday, December 21st. I just woke up. Chapter 999 came out officially yesterday, and there are currently no spoilers online that I am aware of. By the time you're seeing this, Chapter 1000 might have already come out in scan form, but this video was made before any information about Chapter 1000 was available. I didn't pick up the spoilers and pretended, wow, I predicted everything. In case I do, everything that I say in this video is going in completely blind. By the way, if you need even more evidence that I'm not cheating, most of the stuff that I say here is stuff that I've already talked about several times in the past and even talked about in my Chapter 999 analysis on my website, which came out before any spoilers were out there. So without further ado, in this video, I want to talk about my predictions for Chapter 1000 and more specifically about the Will of D before the chapter releases. This isn't necessarily a full Will of D theory video because there's just too much to go over. There are so many things to talk about, and I plan to tackle this subject eventually in the near future, where I'll really go in depth about everything that the D stands for, including its meaning, purpose, existence, and how the Will of D, the inherited will, works within the world of One Piece. However, today we're going to do something more abridged and more casual, basically just trying to explain what the D itself means before Chapter 1000 could potentially maybe spoil it. In other words, this is a predictions video that I'm doing at the last minute just in case the Will of D really is revealed next chapter, so that I can demonstrate my own theories and see if they were right or wrong. Because of all the build-up in the story seems to be hinting that there is going to be a big Will of D reveal, I thought that I would just get out my thoughts. Now, obviously, this is just speculation, we don't know for sure, but the way it's been built up across the past few chapters seems to hint at the fact that the Will of D might finally be revealed next chapter, and we might potentially even find out what this D means. Or maybe not, maybe it's just some vague explanation without really full explaining the meaning of D, but either way, I think it's going to be a central focus of the chapter, so regardless of what will happen, let's speculate. Just 3 chapters ago, Law put particular emphasis on him being a D, and wanting to find out the truth as to why that is the case, and why he is bound to this checkered fate. While, just in the last chapter, Yamato mentioned that Luffy coming to Wano has to be an act of fate, especially because he has the D in his name. And that is the first thing I want to focus on, fate. Because just like Yamato, I personally believe that fate is intrinsically tied to the story of One Piece, and specifically, the initial D. I mean, just like I said, just 3 chapters ago, Law mentioned that he's tied to a checkered fate. This is something that Sengoku mentioned in his dialogue with Law in Chapter 798, and as someone who might have been privy to the secrets of the World Gomerman, this has a lot of validity. Similarly, someone who always talks about fate are the members of Blackbeard's crew. Blackbeard being one of the most influential members of the D-Clan and someone who seemingly might even know a lot about the truth of the world, it makes a lot of sense that perhaps his crew members also believe in this concept of fate. Vanagor very commonly speaks of this fate, and when Ace and Blackbeard fought on Banner Island in Chapter 441, Vanagor described it as a crossroads of fate, a point that would determine the path of the fate of the world. Dokkyu has also mentioned this concept of fate and considered that Luffy was lucky to not be picked by the apples, and we've seen this tied very directly with his crew in different ways. And perhaps most importantly, Rayleigh himself mentioned that perhaps things in life don't happen because of coincidences, and he specifically links this statement to Luffy's straw hat. And you see, I think that the straw hat is the center of all of this in a certain way. This was the straw hat of Gol D. Roger. Isn't it a coincidence that Luffy, of all pirates in the world, is the one who ended with this hat that belonged to the former Pirate King? And furthermore, we know that the implied national treasure of Mary Joyce is a giant straw hat that looks just like Luffy's. Imusama even looked at Luffy's bounty poster and compared it to the hat, further hinting that the two are definitely connected. As such, I think that Luffy is someone who is very closely tied by fate, and that is symbolized by none other than this hat. It is an essential piece in all of this. But even more directly, fate is something that has always nudged Luffy directly in one way or another. I know this sounds a bit ludicrous, but bear with me. This is something that even Yamato mentions within this chapter. He says that it isn't a coincidence that Momonosuke met Luffy, of all people, Ace's brother, and someone with a D in his name. And to be fair, yeah, that is a weird coincidence, isn't it? Think about it. Momonosuke and the others leaped ahead 20 years in time, specifically arriving around the time that Luffy ended his timeskip and was starting to head to the New World. They were only meant to go to Zou, but coincidentally, their ship broke and they were shipwrecked. They ended up in Dressrosa, but coincidentally, Momonosuke also ended up on a ship to Punk Hazard. And then Luffy and the others were headed where the log post was taking them, but after Luffy decided to catch a giant fish, they were caught into the White Storm, a giant sea current that pulled them somewhere else entirely, causing them to come out near the waters of Punk Hazard. And it was Kinemon's presence on the island that also resulted in this distress call that urged Luffy and the others to head to the island. The miraculous meeting between Luffy and Momonosuke would not have been possible if it weren't for all of these coincidences. And it's not just that. There's plenty of occasions in the series where you can point to Luffy being saved thanks to the right people being at the right time. Whether it's Kobe and everyone else at Marineford giving Luffy just enough time to get away, or the only person in the world capable of saving Luffy when he was fatally poisoned not once, but twice, or Pedro being in the right place to help Luffy escape in a situation where he probably could have perhaps died. You might call these just plot armor and plot contrivances, but the truth is that you can find so many of these across the entire series. This isn't a matter of just coincidence because this is Oda. There are no coincidences with Oda. It's thanks to all these people assigned to help Luffy that he is able to constantly make it out of all these situations and keep moving forward. Like Yamato said, all of these coincidences really feel like the work of fate. Perhaps this is also even the power that Mihawk talked about being able to draw people to him that help Luffy achieve all these things. So what I'm getting at ultimately is that the clan is intrinsically tied with the concept of fate. Or at the very least, they carve out their own fate in some way and manage to manipulate what they wish they could happen. I'm not going into specifics, but either way, something here is connected to fate. Now, I know what most of you might think, and yes, I fully agree. The idea of destiny in One Piece sounds horrible, and if anything, it sounds like a really bad narrative choice. After all, we don't want Luffy to be another chosen one of legend that was prophesized or something like that makes all his efforts feel meaningless. But personally, I don't think that Oda will go down that route. I think that fate is tied with the D-Clan. I mean, that's pretty clear here. That's something we can't really deny with what is being stated. But I still think that Luffy is someone who is going to surpass this fate in some way or another, and really carve something of his own. As Rayleigh said, Luffy has become someone even more worthy of that hat, indicating that Luffy might be someone even more worthy than this fate itself and might carve his own path. I mean, I could totally see Oda pulling out something like, "Luffy, you are the chosen one. You must save the world." And then Luffy's like, "Nah, I don't wanna." I mean, a chosen one has to share his meat. I want all the meat for myself. No matter what, I think that Oda will go beyond the chosen one trope and not have fate ruin the story. Just trust in Oda, guys. And for now, let's continue focusing on this. Like I said, there is no denying some sort of fate is at play here. Even Luffy's own birth was seemingly predicted by the Sea Kings, believing that the other king would be born in the future, which is what drive the whole 20 years time leap into happening. So, in some way or another, Luffy coming to Wano, Luffy being a D, and most importantly, Luffy being the one to wear the straw hat, is tied to fate. There's more I'd like to talk about this concept of fate. It's one I've been talking about for years, but I'd like to shift the focus on something else entirely that is still related to this. The D itself. Now, the D-Clan seems to be a group of people that is inherently tied to this concept of fate itself too. All those related to the D-Clan have helped in some way or another to shape the eventual path towards Luffy becoming the Pirate King. Goldie Roger gave Luffy the dream so he could pursue it. Portgas the Ace gave a lot of purpose to Luffy and helped him realize that he needed to be stronger, something which without him he might have managed to survive the New World. Trafalgar D Waterlaw has helped guide Luffy on the right path on gaining all the road poneglyphs. Jaguar D Sol was the one who helped Robin survive so she could be the one to help Luffy, and even someone like Marshall D Teach could be argued to serve as a rival to help Luffy to get where he will get. Though you can also argue that Teach is his own beast. He's a bit of a special case in all of these and will play out in the story in a different way. Regardless, it is clear that the majority of the D are all tied to this concept of fate and making a specific event happen. Just like all the other people that help Luffy on his path and that help him overcome certain doom, these characters are always coming at the right time to help Luffy in just the right way. Because all of these D have been pushing Luffy towards one singular objective. That of becoming Pirate King. That of finding the One Piece, and most importantly of all, that of bringing the dawn of the world. For the D initial shared by all members of the D clan is dawn. Or well, that's my prediction at least, but I think there is a lot, and I mean a lot, to support this. I know it's been a very popular prediction as of late, but I've been an advocate of dawn, meaning the D, since the very beginning. Ever since the dawn of the world was first properly introduced by Pedro in chapter 850, the day the chapter came out, I already said the D could most likely be the dawn, and this dawn that Pedro talked about is the event that is going to tie the entire series together. I knew it from that point. So even if it might seem more likely now, I was among one of the very first to ever predict this. But the reason why it has become so popular is because of all the evidence behind this. The reason why I believed in this back then and why I firmly believe in it right now even further is because there are just so many things that point towards the D being dawn. The dawn of the world is an event that Luffy must bring. Pedro was certain of that. Pedro knew that Luffy had to be the one who would bring the dawn. Something that even Roger was not capable of because he was too early. It's an event that the D, the natural enemies of the Celestial Dragons, and implicitly those ties to the ideals of Joy Boy and the Great Kingdom, are all trying to bring, whether doing consciously or not. In fact, Pedro giving his life can be seen as another instance of someone being at the right time at the right place, like I mentioned before. As Pedro put it, everyone has their own turn. Everyone has their turn to help bring the dawn. But the dawn isn't just relevant to someone like Pedro and the Minks, it is inherently relevant to the Wano country. In her prophecy, Toki said, "O you, moon unaware of the dawn, if your wish is to come true, then cast 9 shadows on the moonlit night, woven of 20 years, and you shall know the brilliance of the dawn." This message was seemingly directed at Oden himself, since Kosuke means moonlight. Toki refers to Oden as the moon unaware of the dawn because he will not be able to witness it himself. But eventually the dawn will come. The night refers to this period of darkness that the Wano country suffers through, while Wano's dawn refers to the day the country will finally return to its former glory. After all, Wano is based on Japan, a country that is known as the land of the rising sun, or in other words, the land of the dawn. Now, the dawn of Wano and the dawn of the world are technically separate events, but they are connected because the dawn of Wano is what is necessary to pave the path for the dawn of the world, one that will only be achieved when Luffy will find the One Piece. I mean, even Yamato himself mentioned the dawn just 3 chapters ago. He mentioned that Momonosuke is also tied to this dawn, likely referring to how he is also necessary to help Luffy bring the dawn, something that he could have only read from Oden's logbook, which is also where he got the indication that the D is special. Both Yamato's knowledge of the dawn and Yamato's knowledge of the D come from the same place, which is the truth that Oden learned on Laugh Tale. And right after that scene, we switch to Law wondering what the D means. Do you see what's going on here? The title of chapter 99 is called The Sake I Brew While Waiting for You. Now, what non-Japanese readers might not realize is that this is Yamato speaking. The pronoun used in this title is kimi, which is the pronoun that Yamato uses. The title is also in quotation marks, indicating that Yamato is talking to someone. And I think that the person Yamato is referring to is not necessarily Ace, but actually Luffy. The you in the Sake brew while waiting for you is Luffy himself, because while Yamato did first drink sake with Ace, the one that he has been waiting for a very long time, in his words, is Luffy. I think that Yamato might have thought that perhaps Ace was the one meant to come and bring the dawn, but realized after Ace died that he was not the one he originally thought, and that Luffy really is the one who might bring the dawn. This is foreshadowed by Yamato drinking sake with Ace under the moon, which represents the night before the dawn, something that is further indicated in Ace's sake. Ace's sake has a label which reads Unaware Night Moon, which could indicate that Ace, at least within the context of this scene, represents the moon unaware of the dawn, the one that Toki mentioned in her prophecy, while Luffy represents the dawn itself that Yamato has been waiting for this whole time, as has everyone else. Again, this is all completely connected. Oda has left hints for this across the entire series, and I'm literally just scraping the surface here. I am not kidding. There are so so many instances across the entire series where the concept of dawn is relevant. I literally have entire pages of notes that I wrote down about this. Where it's the fact that many of Joy Boy's allies have the symbol of the sun in their emblems, whereas the fact that Otohime talked about all species living under the same sun, whereas the fact that dawn in Japanese is written with the English spelling as don, the same sound effect that we've seen plastered all over the series, all of it is connected, all of it has been foreshadowed since the very, very beginning of the series. Ever since the very first chapter of One Piece. One Piece, Chapter 1, Romance Dawn. Something that I think people don't really consider well enough when it comes to what the D means is that One Piece is a Japanese manga, and while D will seemingly be an English word as it's written with the Latin character even in the Japanese version, it has to be a word that the Japanese audience can clearly understand, no matter how little knowledge of the language they might have. But Dawn fits that perfectly because it was officially written in English on the cover of the very first chapter and the very first volume of One Piece. Any Japanese reader who has ever picked up One Piece will have read this word in English, so it's just the perfect word to be the letter D. I mean, hell, if you want to get technical, Dawn is a real name. It actually is a real middle name, so it would make perfect sense if it was actually the middle name of these people. Something like Monkey Destiny Luffy sounds a bit dumb, but Monkey Dawn Luffy, well, that's a real name. And wouldn't it be fitting if we're looking at a pattern between chapters? Chapter 1 introduced to us the D initial when it introduced Monkey D. Luffy, and, subtly enough, it also mentioned the word Dawn, subtly hinting at the meaning of the word D. Then, Chapter 100 first introduced to us the concept of inherited will, the will of D. And Chapter 1000 could finally introduce us to what the D really means, perhaps revealing what it stands for or even just explaining what it signifies. We could have Luffy reaching the rooftop of Onigashima, perhaps with Zoro too to show a parallel to the start of the arc, as Yamato narrates over the relevance of the D, as it plays with Luffy finally facing Kaido and Big Mom in order to defeat them and bring Wano to its dawn, which will be the leading factor that will trigger the events that will lead towards the dawn of the world. And even more fitting would be Oda ending that chapter with a Act 3 end, and then we switch to Reverie. Please, Oda, please. There is even more evidence that I can bring towards the D being done, like I said. Believe me, I have a literal mountain of evidence, even more than what I have mentioned in this video, but it's just too much to go in one video alone. I promise you, I will make a full video next year in due time, where I will cover everything about the D and every single way in which Oda set this up. But for the moment being, I hope this at least serves as a prediction to get in right before Oda potentially reveals it in the big 1000. There's so much more I want to talk about, but I will do that in due time. I should probably acknowledge one final thing very quickly though, which is the concept of the Wheel of Dreams that I talked about in Return to the Reverie. I personally think that dreams as a fundamental concept is very tied to the Wheel of D, and something that will play a massive role in how the Wheel of D actually operates. I ultimately feel that what drives people isn't just fate, but dreams themselves. However, I don't think that the D itself necessarily stands for dreams, especially since it's not a word that is ever written in English in the Japanese release, so I don't think it could really make much sense that way. But it's still possible, maybe it could be dreams, but I don't think it's as likely as dawn because of everything that hits towards that. I simply used Wheel of Dreams in Return to the Reverie simply because it fit better for that narrative, and I think it is tied, I think it is connected, but I think it's more likely that the D represents dawn. But yes, those are my predictions for Chapter 1000. By the time this is posted publicly, the scans might already be out and this video will have either aged perfectly or aged horribly and become utterly irrelevant, but I hope that either way you found this video interesting. Anyways, I just hope that you all get to enjoy Chapter 1000. Be hyped, be moderate, be whatever you want. Enjoy the chapter in whichever way you want. Just make sure to enjoy the experience. This is probably my last video for 2020. I'm planning a lot more content in 2021 and I've got many projects I want to work on during that year, but for the moment being, we'll say goodbye to this year, and I just want to say thank you for accompanying me all the way and giving me the chance to experience this legendary Chapter 1000 with all of you. So, I'll see you then when we finally tackle Chapter 1000. Take care and thanks for watching.